Same paper as our previous lesson, but it'll be finished on a different day. So in these examples up here, we were given an equation and we found the solutions to that equation on the graph. Now, in the next examples, we'll be doing the reverse. Instead of being given an equation and finding the solutions, they're going to give us the solutions and we'll need to find the equations. So the good news is there's a very clear and repeated pattern with doing all problems like this, where they give us two solutions and we're to write the absolute value equation. Now, you have to memorize this. That's the only way to do this. And honestly, it's not super hard to memorize, but you won't be able to do this without memorizing it. So we always do the absolute value of x minus the midpoint. So the midpoint is whatever point is exactly in the middle of the two solutions. So like here, the midpoint would be 0, because that would be 4 away from the two solutions. Here, the midpoint would be 1, because it's exactly 2 away from the two solutions. Here, well, it may not be as obvious to see. I can just use my eyes and see it's -3, because that's 4 away from 1 and 4 away from -7. But two other ways you could approach figuring out the midpoint. You can cross them off one at a time. So it's not that one or that one. It's not that one or that one. It's not that one or that one, so it must be that one. Another way you can do it is say, well, how far apart are these points? Well, from -7, oh, never mind, I get ahead of myself. This is the other way to do it. So that's another way to find the midpoint. So let's go ahead and do that for all three of these problems. So it tells us to do the absolute value of x minus the midpoint. Now, you don't have to write -0. Obviously, other numbers you have to write, but this is just as fine if you just say absolute value of x. Now, we're not finished. We'll come back and do the second half in a second. Okay, so this one, the midpoint was 1. So we do the absolute value of x minus 1. And for this one, we found it's -3. So watch carefully. We're always subtracting the midpoint. So we would do x minus -3. Now, you really should not leave the answer that way. It's best to go ahead and say, well, minus a negative is the same as plus a positive. So we'll do absolute value of x plus 3. So we've completed this part of the problem. Now we've got to do this. What these three all equal is the distance, always positive, so it's always a positive number, from the midpoint to either solution. So on here, we knew our midpoint was 0. So you're going to just say, well, to get from 0 to 4, I have to add 4. So this one is equal to 4. Because the distance between the midpoint and that solution is 4, the distance between the midpoint and that solution is also 4. Okay, here, the midpoint is 1, so we have to go up 1, 2. So this is equal to 2. Because it's also 1, 2 to get the other solution. Okay, for the last one, -3 is our midpoint, so we just count up 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is equal to 4. So there's obviously nothing wrong with just counting like I showed you on these. But what I started to say earlier and realized it was the wrong time. One other way you can find this value if you want to is figure out the total distance between the two solutions and divide by 2. So for example, from -4 to +4, that's a distance of 8, because it takes you 4 to get 0, 4 more to get to 4, so a total of 8. Divide 8 by 2, and you get that number. The distance from -1 to 3 is 4, because you have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And 4 divided by 2 is 2. This also has the distance of 8 from -7 to +1. So you divide that by 2 and you get 4 once again. Okay, that's all for this lesson. We just want to focus on practicing this, because once you memorize this rhythm and this routine and this pattern, it'll be quite simple.